When Tuki returned to the room Diana and her family had lent her for the night, she practically flopped into bed. At long last, her exhaustion won out, and she drifted into a fitful but ultimately restful slumber. She awoke when the first rays of morning sunlight cleaved through the foothills only a few hours later. A particularly opinionated rooster decided to air its grievances with the gods themselves somewhere outside, bringing an end to any final hopes of sleeping in. But Tuki was used to being up bright and early. She arose with the sun and ensured the room was as it had been when it had been given to her, tidying up the bed and clearing away any clues, save one, that might have hinted at her presence. That done, she followed Patrick's instructions, applying some of the tonic he had given her to her bandaged wrist. The numbing sensation was wondrous, especially after the abuse she had put it through that night. That done, she gathered up her things, including the stolen papers hidden carefully away in her pack, and set off down the stairs. Diana was up and dressed, drinking a mug of something hot and steaming at the dining table. She glanced up at Tuki and put on a friendly smile.
"Morning, hun. Sleep well? As well as can be expected, yes,"
Tuki said with a smile and a warm nod. She eyed Diana's apron and tilted her head.
"Will you be working at the bakery again today?"
Diana lifted her mug and gave a pointed stare at something up and away from her.
"Aye? As soon as a certain son of mine finishes getting dressed,"
she said, raising her voice for the end. "I'm trying!" Patrick's voice hollered back, muffled by walls and distance. "I can't find my belt!" Diana's face fell into her free hand. She groaned in dismay.
"Tuki? Yes? Don't ever have kids."
Tuki chuckled weakly.
"I don't know that I'll ever have the time,"
she confessed with a lopsided smile.
"But I'll take it under advisement."
Diana chuckled and gave Tuki another look. Her smile faltered.
"Heading out, are ya?"
Tuki glanced down at her traveling attire, then shook her head.
"Soon, but not quite yet. I was hoping to buy something from your bakery before I hit the road, and there was something else I wanted to do, too."
Diana turned to her more fully, it now being her turn to tilt her head.
"Oh? And what'd that be, then?"
Tuki smiled cryptically at her.
"It's a surprise."
Diana matched the smile.
"Oh, so that's how it's gonna be, is it, little Miss Raven?"
she asked coyly.
"All right, then. Keep your secrets. You can go on ahead to the bakery if you like. I'll be along soon."
Tuki nodded.
"Right. And Diana?"
Tuki's smile widened. She put a hand to her heart and bowed her head down.
"Thank you."
Diana rolled her eyes and waved a hand dismissively.
"Oh, come on now. None of that fancy gratitude, malarkey. You're welcome, but don't make it weird, you hear?"
Tuki tittered quietly.
"Right. I'll see you later,"
she said before turning and taking her leave. The day she had arrived in Idonyr, the weather had been gray and gloomy to match the dreary vibe of the town, a fitting backdrop to her mood and the usual discomfort of her usual day. This morning, however, the clouds had departed, and as if to complement her good mood, she was met by a beautiful day. Resplendent sunshine came from on high, and while Idonyr was still gray, it was no longer quite so gloomy. The stone buildings almost seemed to glow, reflecting warmth that contrasted nicely against the chill of the foothills. Tuki beamed, hefted her pack, and set off for the tower in the center of town, and the notice board beside it. Only a handful of people were out and about when she arrived. That was good. Finding a space behind a nearby building to wait, She carefully extracted a few nails and the records she had pilfered from Tobias's mansion. Once she was sure she had everything she needed, she waited until no one was looking, then marched briskly for the notice board. She looked around to make sure no one had eyes on her, then quietly pinned each sheet to the board in a disorganized, obvious spread. Once she was sure an errant breeze wouldn't whisk away her work, she nodded in approval and strode for the bakery. All that remained was to wait. It was only a few minutes before Diana and Patrick arrived. Tuki had taken up a position by the door, a small pouch of coins in her hand. She smiled at the arriving duo and tossed the pouch at Diana as she approached. "Catch!" she called. Diana caught the coin with both hands, grunting in surprise. Then she looked at Tuki with a quirked brow.
"You trying to buy out my entire stock, Fletcher?"
she asked with an amused smirk.
"We can call it payment for a night in your guest room if that bothers you."
Tuki shot back with a smile of her own.
Nah, that was free,"
Diana countered.
"Then I guess I'm buying a lot of food for the road."
Tuki concluded with a nod.
"Something that won't perish easily if you have anything like that." "Well, not on hand,"
Diana muttered, rubbing at her chin.
"We talking hardtack? That's one option."
Diana nodded.
"Right, I'll see what I can throw together. Patrick?"
The two unlocked the door and strode inside, Tuki following them in. She found a seat by the window and got as comfortable as she could. As she waited, her eyes darted to the notice board every so often. It wouldn't take long for someone to notice, would it? She'd like to see the fruits of her labor before she moved on.
"What you looking at?"
Diana asked after a few minutes, emerging from the back of the bakery. She carried something wrapped in parchment and set it on the table in front of Tuki.
"Just admiring the tower."
Tuki lied easily, unwrapping the paper curiously. Her eyes widened when she saw one of those delectable blueberry muffins she had seen the day before.
"Whoa, I didn't. We'll consider it a part of your order. Just take it, would you? Get it out of my storage before it goes stale."
Diana cut her off with a smirk.
"Besides, it's berry. Don't krauven like berries?" "That is a stereotype, and it also just so happens to be true,"
Tuki said while happily ripping some of the muffin away with her beak. Diana cackled and sat down across from Tuki.
"Business ain't gonna pick up for a little bit yet. So, what's the super secret surprise you're brewing up for us?"
she asked eagerly. Tuki glanced at the notice board again. And this time, there was someone there. A middle-aged fellow with a bald head and a strikingly red shirt was reading one of the sheets she had pinned up. Diana followed her gaze and tilted her head.
"Is Rupert somehow involved?"
she asked, nodding at the man in question.
"'Cause, he's an asshole." No,
Tuki assured Diana, trying to hide the smirk in her voice.
"Give it a minute. It's cooking."
"Cooking?" Diana asked.
"Oh, now I'm really curious. What is it? Come on, you can't keep jerking me around like this. It's not fair." "It's the best way I could think of to repay my debt to you,"
Tuki finally said, giving Diana another smile. Diana blinked.
"You still on about that?"
she asked. Tuki nibbled on her muffin some more.
"Where I come from, I was raised to always repay my debts. My people are often scorned and looked down on in these human-dominated lands. So when one does good by us, we should do good by them in return. So I am still on about that, yes."
Diana's smile returned, a more heartfelt and tender version this time.
"That's a good life lesson. If only more humans taught it to their young'uns. Not whatever crap Tobias had force-fed into his noggin."
As if on cue, a loud voice rang out from the notice board, deafening in its volume. "That motherfucker!" Tuki and Diana both turned to look, to see Rupert's shoulders hunched. Even from here, Tuki could see that the man's flesh was flushing red with uncontrollable fury. Diana blinked.
"The bloody hell's gotten up his ass this time?"
she asked, rising from her seat. Tuki smirked. That shout had drawn the attention of a few other passers-by, who were starting to approach. One of them, a younger man, called over. "Rupert, what's wrong?" Rupert spun, holding the parchment in his hand up high. Even from here, Tuki could recognize it as the receipt for that gaudy golden rapier. "Everyone, come and look at this!" Diana's brow furrowed.
"Right, I got a bad feeling,"
she said before calling back over her shoulder.
"Patrick, something's going on out front. I'm gonna check it out. You and Tuki stay put,"
she hollered. Patrick poked his head out of the kitchen door. "What's happening?"
"Dunno yet,"
Diana said before stepping out. Tuki rose and strode to the door as well. Not to step outside, but to listen in on what was about to happen more easily. The crowd was growing as more and more people came to see what all the fuss was about. As more eyes looked over the stolen receipts, more voices rose in unabashed fury. "He spent how much? On a sword?
"Are we certain it's him? That's his bloody signature, ain't it? The handwriting's all the same."
And look at this! Look at all this food! Bloody hell, I could feed my entire family for a month with half of this gawk!
The hell's a hot tub?
The man's a bloody leech! This is what he's blown all our money on? Patrick stepped up beside Tuki as the crowd grew increasingly incensed. He frowned and glanced sideways at her. He didn't say anything, though. She just smiled, wider and wider with every new voice. Even Diana's voice was joining the outrage. "That pig slobbering cock!" she roared like an enraged mother bear. "We can't let him get away with this," another voice added. "If the money were going to somehow making our lives better, I might not mind so much. Better granaries or a new schoolhouse or something, but this? And who knows what other crap he's blowing our money on?" Diana's voice came again.
"Now what the hell is this? Give that here, Rupert."
"I don't think you want to, Rupert." Rupert shrank away from Diana and sheepishly passed her the sheet of parchment. Tuki tensed. She looked sideways at Patrick.
"Brace yourself."
Patrick looked at her, his jaw falling open.
"Huh?"
And then Diana began to read.
"There are words scribbled out, names, I think. It's a love letter? I'll just skip over the name. My dearest, how do I begin to describe the delight I feel in your presence? Nay, mere words could not capture your divine essence. Brown hair cascading down like a waterfall, but better. But unlike a waterfall, your hair is not wet, unless you wash it, which you do sometimes."
Tuki was blushing again, and Patrick seemed to be in similar straits. He held a hand up to his mouth. The crowd looked to be suffering just as much, though some of them were snickering. Diana, sounding increasingly bemused, continued.
"Your eyes, like polished marbles. They sparkle when you blink, enchanting and exhilarating. Lashes that flutter like a fucking... like a horse's tail."
She stopped reading and burst out laughing.
"Good God, I think the bloodline ends with him."
Patrick doubled over, choking out a snort of laughter.
"Mother,"
he chided between wheezes of uncomfortable chuckles. "Does it say any more?" another man in the crowd asked. "Please tell me there's more. I can tell my son all the shit you don't say to a woman." "Are you a woman, Murdoch?" Diana called over to him. Well, no.
Then let me be the judge.
Diana jeered before adding in a lower voice.
Not that you'd be wrong regardless.
Tuki chuckled as Diana continued reading Tobias's truly awful, awful love letter. She didn't see any sign of Shayla in the crowd, which she counted as a good thing. She could only imagine how humiliating it would be for her to hear such colorful prose written about her. As Diana started to read into Tobias's musings about how he imagined how best to court Shayla, Tuki cast her eyes about again. Her smile became strained when she saw a certain someone marching down the road for the tower. The author of the letter currently being read out loud to the entire town. His footsteps slowed, the color draining from his face. Then it returned, deepened to an truly impressive shade of scarlet, and consumed the whole of his face, neck, and the tips of his ears. Tuki had to imagine steam puffing out of his ears.
What the hell are you doing?
He squealed in a most undignified manner, sprinting toward the crowd.
Stop reading that at once!
Oh, and here comes the incel, Diana called out to him. I was just getting to the part about this mystery woman's—
I said stop!
Tobias bellowed, shoving through the crowd and forcefully ripping the letter out of Diana's hands. He cast his eyes about, swiftly spotting the other sheets, and darted about like a frenzied viper, snatching up each sheet.
Who gave you these? Tell me. I command you!
Stop you and your commands!
One of the men in the crowd snapped, stepping forward to shove Tobias back.
Is this how you've been getting your kicks while we're bleeding money and going hungry? A fancy sword? A magic tub? And this?
Tobias's face was turning redder and redder.
Silence! I am your governor! How dare you speak to me in such a—
How dare us?
Diana snapped, stepping forward and shoving Tobias to the ground.
How dare you? I always knew you were a spoiled little brat, Toby, but I never thought you were an idiot and a creep, too. Shame on you. Shame!
In a matter of seconds, the word shame was being loudly and proudly chanted at the sprawled little lordling. His tomato-faced complexion warred admirably with the ashen one trying to take over. His eyes were wide, his jaw working up and down in shock. He looked like a helpless fish suffocating on the dock. Again, Tuki almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Tobias looked around in wide-eyed confusion as if he was lost. Until eventually, his eyes landed on Tuki standing in the doorway of the bakery. They locked onto her, hardened, and suddenly the feathers on the back of Tuki's neck stood on end. Tobias stood, his hands clenching into fists. He lifted a finger and pointed it at Tuki.
Look!
He roared like an enraged bear. Several eyes briefly followed his finger, but most kept chanting shame on his head. Tuki still took a step back, however.
The krauven!
Tobias went on.
The outsider! These outlandish records are not real! They're a fabrication! They're falsehoods made by this corker!
Tuki involuntarily hissed, her feathers flaring in a display of indignant rage. Several voices rose from the crowd, some heaping more shame on his head for daring to drop the old racial slur, others still calling him out for trying to dodge accountability.
Oh, sure, Diana mocked. Because your red-faced panic at me reading your poetry was the response of an innocent man.
What evidence do you have that these records are true?
Tobias demanded, spinning to face the rest of them.
Fine, I will accept the letter as mine. A letter I never sent because I know it's awful. But the rest? The receipts? Mere words, devoid of substance. Where is the proof? Where is the other party with whom I supposedly did business, who can verify the veracity? Do you not see that you've been duped by an outsider? A Poverin agent sent to cause chaos while my father is away, were I to guess.
Diana crossed her arms.
Boy,
Stop.
if the letter is yours, then all this other shit came from the same place. And the handwriting's exactly the same. It's done. We've got your number.
But this is what krauven do!
Tobias insisted.
They lie and steal and scurry away before anyone even realizes what they've done.
No, boy.
Diana shot back.
That's just you. So scurry.
Yeah, bugger off back to your mansion!
Another voice shouted.
And drop the taxes while you're at it.
I think we should hang the bastard!
His father won't approve of that, but we can break his knees.
Tobias took a step back as the crowd grew increasingly agitated. Diana at the head. He looked around frantically, his fingers flexing and curling over and over as if he were hoping for a solution to magically manifest in his palm.
You're a bloody disgrace,
Diana continued, jabbing her finger in Tobias's face.
Your father's a great man, and you'll never be half of who he is. Never!
Something in Tobias's stance changed. He drew back, and in a blur of movement, his fist crashed into Diana's face. The crowd gasped and backed away as the baker fell to the ground, screaming and cradling her face. Patrick sprung into motion immediately.
Mother!
He shouted, already fumbling for his kit. Tuki was hot on his heels. Her gratification at seeing Tobias so thoroughly humiliated immediately replaced with guilt.
Back! Back!
Tobias yelled, his voice shaking and unhinged as the crowd roared around him.
Get away from me, you savages!
What the hell is wrong with you?
Tuki snapped as she and Patrick made it to Diana's side, no longer able to maintain her silence. Tobias spun on her, and the feathers on the back of her neck flared again in response to the manic look in his eyes. He pointed at her.
You'll pay for this!
And then he was rushing at her. Tuki's heart skipped a beat, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Time seemed to slow as he drew his fist back and threw himself at her. But his punch was slow, clumsy, and obviously telegraphed. She ducked down and darted past him, evading the attack with minimal effort. As she passed, she caught sight of the hilt of his rapier still sheathed on his belt. On instinct, she reached out with her good hand and took the hilt in her hand as she passed. There was a jerking motion as her shoulder jostled. Her efforts were rewarded, however, as with a sharp scrape, the satisfying feeling of a weapon fell into her hand. She passed Tobias and quickly turned to face him, lifting the stolen rapier's blade. Tobias spun around with a barbaric roar, but drew to a halt just shy of impaling himself between the eyes on his own sword. The crowd gasped, many people taking a step back. The fury faded from Tobias's face, replaced entirely with silent, bone-cold terror. Tuki didn't move. She was breathing heavily, but that was more from the remnants of her moment of panic at being charged like that. She hadn't even been thinking about it when she had grabbed his sword, she just did it. Now she had it pressed to his forehead. She could kill him, quite easily if such was her intent. But she had no desire to be labeled an outlaw for murdering the son of a popular landlord, and self-defense probably wouldn't be a sufficient excuse to give her a free pass. Still, as long as she was in this position, she may as well take advantage of it.
Confess,
she said, narrowing her eyes. Tobias blinked. What?
Confess to these people,
She said, pushing the tip of the rapier slightly forward. Not enough to draw blood, just to make sure he felt it.
Admit that you've been wasting their money on your own vain pleasures. Admit that you are nothing like your father. Admit that these people deserve better, and walk back every change you've made since you took over.
Why?
Tobias demanded, unable to hide the terrified shivering in his voice. He tried to back away, but Tuki matched his retreat step for step.
Why do you even care? You're an outsider.
I am an outsider, yes. But I also have friends here, and I'd rather not see them suffer to maintain your fragile ego.
She hissed at him, her feathers flaring again.
Also, you called me a corker.
Tobias's legs were shaking, and his knees slowly gave out. He fell to them, and Tuki followed him with the rapier.
I can't,
he whimpered, his eyes watering. Tuki frowned and pushed the rapier a little closer.
You can,
she stressed.
and you will. Unless, of course, you want me to leave you to an angry mob.
Tobias's eyes flecked this way and that, taking in the crowd. They were silent, but the rage and contempt in their eyes was evident. If Tuki didn't kill him, they certainly would. A realization he came to on his own time. He swallowed heavily, and barely stifling his sobs, screwed his eyes shut.
Fine,
He blubbered weakly.
I admit it. The receipts are mine. They're real. I started raising tax money to treat myself. It was all going to go back to normal when Father returned. I swear, it was just...
Just what?
Tuki sneered. Tobias shuddered.
stupid.
Tuki nodded.
Good answer,
She said.
and the rest?
Tobias choked on his words a few times.
I will speak to my clerks.
He finally relented.
All of the changes I've made, the tax increases, they'll be reverted.
Will you be paying these people back for what you stole from them?
Tuki asked. Tobias began to protest, but a snarl from somewhere in the crowd silenced him. He looked down and nodded his head.
As much as I can. I swear it. In my family's name. But not all of it is mine anymore.
Well, then you had best start working to make it back.
Tuki said.
And when your father comes home, you throw yourself at his feet, you beg forgiveness for shaming his bloodline, for throwing his town into such financial ruin, and for being the worst courter of women in all of Valrive.
I swear it.
Tobias babbled.
On your honor? No, you don't have any. On your father's honor, in his name.
Yes, I swear it. In my father's name. And on his honor, I will do what you ask.
Tuki was quiet a moment longer, letting his declaration settle in with finality. Then, she smiled and lifted the rapier away from him.
Then we're done here.
Tobias didn't waste a second. He scrambled away like a frightened cat on a polished surface, tripping over himself time and again as, crying like a scorned child, he went running back to his mansion. Tuki blinked, then reached after him.
Hey, wait! You forgot your rapier.
He was gone. Tuki looked down at the weapon and shrugged.
I guess this is mine now.
She thought. Then she looked to Diana. The woman's nose was bleeding and had an ugly bend in it halfway up, but she otherwise seemed fine. She was staring at Tuki with wide eyes, as was everyone else. Tuki felt her cheeks warming from all of the attention and coughed into her hand. Setting the rapier down to free up her good hand, she reached down to help Diana up.
Are you okay?
Diana accepted the hand, helped to her feet by Tuki and Patrick. She stared at the krauven for a long moment, pale-faced.
Was that the surprise?
She asked. Tuki flushed a little deeper.
Well, not the violence. Were you getting punched? Or any of the rest of it?
She confessed awkwardly.
But I did want to bring his misdeeds into the public. Shame him into doing better. I should have realized he would react violently. Brats often do. I'm sorry.
Diana shook her head.
No, darling, don't you dare apologize. I don't care that I have a broken nose. Do you see the look on his face?
She asked, her own splitting into a wide grin.
And gratification notwithstanding, you made that bastard walk back everything. Did you get those things?
Tuki laughed weakly.
I think that is one secret I will be keeping.
Diana snorted.
Go figure. Ah, damn, that smarts.
She hissed, holding a hand up to her face.
I really should examine it more closely, Mother.
Patrick stressed worriedly.
Please. No, that can wait,
Diana declared before giving Tuki a wide smile.
I think Idonyr just got itself a new hero, eh?
Tuki blushed genuinely and looked away.
I don't know about that. I just wanted to repay you. By holding a rapier to our landlord's forehead.
Diana laughed in exasperation. Tuki's feathers poofed up.
I didn't plan for that. And I wasn't actually going to hurt him.
Someone in the crowd scoffed. I would've. Diana laughed and patted Tuki on the shoulder.
You, girl, are far too nice for your own good. But that's a good thing.
Tuki smiled.
Thank you.
Diana shook her head.
Nah, thank you,
she said before spinning around and raising her voice to address the crowd.
And you all better thank her too. 3 cheers for Tuki Fletcher.
Tuki stopped, her face getting hot again.
Wait, no.
Too late. The cheers had begun. And there was more than just huzzas coming her way. Shouted words of gratitude and appreciation for the aid. Calls that she'd always be welcome in Idonyr and more besides. It floored her. Tuki was used to being doubted, scorned, and shunned because of the feathers on her back and the curse of the yearning in her heart. But here, for this moment, in this place, she was being hailed and cheered as a hero. A small-time hero, sure, one whose good deed did not extend beyond the confines of a stepping-stone village in the middle of nowhere. But still, for the first time in what felt like forever, she held still. She didn't move, she just let it all fall on her. She might not ever come back here, she knew. She was too fragile, and the road was dangerous. She would be on it again soon. But for that brief instant, she felt no need to press on. A tiny smile crept onto her face. For the moment, at least, her yearning was satisfied. And so was she.